In this comparative video, my focus will be on gender theory in The Handmaiden and Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I will be looking into the portrayal of men and love in these two films. The Handmaiden is a Park Chan-wook film about an orphaned pickpocket named Suki in 1930s Korea who becomes a handmaiden to Lady Hideko, the niece of a rich book collector's late wife. She is drawn into a plan by Count Fujiwara to trick Lady Hideko into marrying him so he can throw her in a mental asylum and steal her money. In the end, the two women realized Fujiwara was deceiving them both into tricking each other and planned together to follow through with his plan to run away with the inheritance money without him. Portrait of a Lady on Fire is a Celine Sciamma film about Marianne, a painter who was commissioned to paint a wedding portrait for Heloise. Heloise is engaged to a man who she doesn't know and didn't agree to marry. Marianne was tasked to observe Heloise and paint her without her knowing in secret. In the end, they form a relationship for a brief time before they have to return to their societal roles. During the decline of the Meiji era and the rise of the Taisho period in Japan was the Western cultural ban influence in Japan. And during this brief period, Japan was a democracy while still invading and ruling over Korea. According to Japan Visitor, the Taisho period from 1912 to 1926 is often considered a brief flowering of democracy in Japan before the country slid into militarism, ultranationalism, and totalitarianism in the early Showa period. This film took place in France during the 18th century in 1770, just before the French Revolution was breaking out. According to History.com, the French Revolution was a watershed event in modern European history that began in 1789 and ended in the late 1790s with the ascent of Napoleon Bonaparte. During this period, French citizens raised and redesigned their country's political landscape, uprooting centuries-old institutions such as absolute monarchy and the feudal system. The Handmaiden portrays a woman, Hideko, who is betrothed to marry her uncle so he may inherit her money as well as is being pursued by Count Fujiwara, contradictory to hers and her uncle's wishes. While both these men are interested in marrying her for various reasons, Hideko is taken by her handmaid, Suki. These women in The Handmaiden are much more dependent on each other and men than the women in Portrait of a Lady on Fire, but the men in the film have made it so they are more dependent on them. Hideko's uncle raised her to fear him and follow his every wish, and Fujiwara blackmailed and coerced them both into going along with his plans. The women are very intelligent, but they rely on a man's ego and density to escape together. Because the film was based on Sarah Waters' book, Fingersmith, the New Yorker pointed out how the primary subject explored by the Welsh writer Sarah Waters is the kind of freedom that women can only find with one another. The way their love was portrayed in the film can be clearly seen from a male gaze, as most of their love scenes were not very romantic or caring, but more raunchy and purely sexual. While we know that their love is more than that based on their dialogue and non-sexual acts, the lens we see the film from is a male lens and doesn't portray their relationship with the same care as Portrait of a Lady on Fire does. As Korea Times stated, opponents to the film may voice concerns about the male gaze and misogyny that creeps in, which is valid, but so is the attempt to tell a story that focuses on two female characters as they fall in love, even if it's somewhat twisted. The theme of their love shifts at the end because they're finally free and no longer in the eye of the male gaze of either Hideko's uncle or Count Fujiwara.
ございません。
いいえ。なあ、 아가씨, 제가 잘못했어요. 안나? 잘못했어요, 아가씨. 죽지 마세요. 제가 잘못했어요.
뭘 잘못했는데?
아가씨를 꼬여서 그 나쁜 새끼하고 결혼시키려고 했어요. 정신병원에 쳐놓고 도망가려고 했고. 죽지 마세요. 결혼하지 마세요, 아가씨.
스키야, 내가 걱정돼? 난 네가 걱정돼.
제 이름 어떻게 아셨어요?
난 네가 날 속여먹은 줄 알지. 속은 건 너야. 정신병원에 네가 들어가는 거라고. 내 이름으로 널 거기 가둬놓고 난 네가 돼서 멀리 달아나려고 애써 그 새끼하고. 미안해하진 않을게. 너도 날 등쳐먹으려고 했으니까.
Contrary to the Handmaiden's portrayal of love in a twisted scenario, in Portrait of a Lady on Fire, love is more a portrayal of art, while the Handmaiden's love springs from deception. A Portrait of a Lady on Fire springs from art and care. Heloise is similar to Hideko, betrothed to a man she doesn't want to marry. As Marianne was painting, you could see her falling more and more for Heloise, as if the painting was her progression of love. The New Republic states it best: falling in love is portrayed as a creative process in which the two women collaborate. Portrait of a Lady on Fire's portrayal of love is a much more artistic and metaphoric portrayal than the Handmaiden's, even with the similar themes. Art takes time and is gradual. There are mistakes and things that must be worked out and fixed, but eventually you finish the artwork and it's either the grand masterpiece you expected or something completely different and unexpected. As New York Times said, Heloise and Marianne are rendered as two people fiercely drawn to each other. They are also an intellectual match, and even though Heloise never touches a canvas, they become partners in making art. The women in Portrait of a Lady on Fire are portrayed more independently than the Handmaiden because there are no men for them to depend on in the film. While there are no men physically in the film, they still happen to be the root cause of these women's problems. Heloise was engaged to marry a man she didn't know because her sister committed suicide to avoid the same fate. Sophie, on the other hand, had to go through many trials for aborting a child she never wanted because a man took advantage of her once. The women in Portrait of a Lady on Fire already had freedom while Hideko and Suki didn't and had to work for it. Heloise was still confined to her betrothal to a man, but she was free until he received the painting of her. The way their love was portrayed as a work of art, but all art must be finished at some point, and that's how their love ended, with a finished work of art.
Après vous, j'imagine.
Pas à voix haute, mais oui. D'autant que dans sa dernière lettre, elle s'excusait. Sans motif.
De quoi s'excusait-elle, d'après vous?
De me laisser son destin.
Vous parlez de ce destin comme s'il était terrible.
Que savez-vous de mon futur mariage?
Je sais que vous devez vous unir à un Milanais, c'est tout.
C'est tout ce que j'en sais aussi.
In conclusion, the way that men and the women's love were portrayed in the end of each film is different as well. While Hideko and Suki ended up free and together while the men died in the end, Heloise and Marianne ended up confined to their respective roles in society, with Heloise marrying the man she was betrothed to, and Marianne going back to teaching painting. The end of Portrait of a Lady on Fire left a sense that their love was more longing and distant versus the free and happy love that Hideko and Suki shared in the end.